how did the Ottoman Empire react when Herzl's Zionism emerged? Herzl envisioned a Jewish homeland in Palestine, then under Ottoman control. Were there any negotiations between the Zionists and the Ottomans? Let's discuss. The Ottoman Empire became a refuge for Jews from the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal, after they were expelled due to the Alhambra decree during the Spanish Reconquista of 1492. After they were expelled at the end of the 15th century, Muslims also fled during this time. This wasn't the first wave of Jewish expulsions. Jews had been forced out of England in the 13th and from France in the 14th century. Within the Ottoman Empire, Jewish communities flourished in the 16th and the 17th centuries, thanks to their economic importance and the fact that the Ottomans allowed non-Jews to take on roles involving foreign affairs. While Jews still faced certain restrictions, their religious and cultural life was largely preserved. Jews made notable contributions to the empire's growth, but the decline of the Ottoman power was already beginning during its height. A key factor was a series of treaties that, while seemingly harmless at the time, later undermined Ottoman authority. For instance, the empire gave European merchants legal immunity and trade privileges. Although initially this seemed like no threat, it gave Europe growing leverage, especially in the 18th century as Western powers grew militarily and economically stronger. The Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca in 1774 followed the Russo-Turkish War, 1768-1774. It resulted in Russia gaining access to the Black Sea and the right to build a Greek Orthodox church in Istanbul, giving it religious influence in Ottoman affairs. In 1831, Egypt's ruler Muhammad Ali sent his army into Ottoman Syria, including Palestine, sparking the First Egyptian-Ottoman War. Egypt emerged victorious and implemented reforms in the region, though not without resistance. By 1840, following the Second Egyptian-Ottoman War, and with British intervention, the Ottomans regained control over Palestine. One key point is that the British did not initially exploit the treatment of non-Muslims to gain influence within the Ottoman Empire. Instead, they focused on maintaining the empire's territorial integrity and stepped in only when it served their interests. This approach helped preserve political and territorial stability in the region, vital for securing British access to India.
When reading the news, have you experienced the following problem? You don't know what to trust. In today's media landscape, challenges arise. There is an overload of information, there is sensationalism, and there are manipulative algorithms. Take, for example, the following news item. Trump has said that it is important that Middle Eastern countries join the Abraham Accords, which are a series of normalization agreements aimed at establishing diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab nations. Surprisingly, if you look at the biased distribution, you can see 65% of the sources lean to the right, which means if you are only reading stories from left-wing publications, you most likely miss the story. When you go further down, you can start to see the full picture and how each side is covering the story. Al Jazeera, for example, says that Trump invokes attacks and wants Middle Eastern countries to have ties with Israel. Yeshiva World News, from the right wing and also an Orthodox Jewish online news publication, is in full support of what Trump is saying. Ground News can help you show your blind spots, stories that one side of the spectrum might be ignoring. Personally, I found it incredibly useful for getting a more balanced view of world events, and I think you will too. So, if you want to take control of your news feed and see the bigger picture, go to ground.news/historyhustle to subscribe and get 40% off the Vantage plan. Use this QR code or go to the link ground.news/historyhustle.
Agreements between the Ottomans and European powers integrated the Levant, modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel-Palestine, into global trade networks. However, this cost local merchants dearly. Regional autonomy declined, profits dropped, and trade came under European economic control. By this time, the Ottoman Empire was visibly weakening, and the European powers, Britain, France, and Russia, were stepping into dominant roles. After Sultan Mahmud II's death in 1839, his successor, Abdülmecid, introduced reforms like legal equality and protection of life. These reforms mirrored Western secular models and later promised equal rights for Muslims and non-Muslims. Following the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, Ottoman authority in Palestine was reinforced, and the region experienced economic growth. Tourism also grew, especially pilgrimage to biblical sites. Despite this modernization, not everyone welcomed the reforms. Some Muslims resented secular equality, and some Christians opposed being equated with Jews under the new law. In 1858 and again in 1867, the Ottoman Empire introduced land reform laws that had lasting consequences. These laws permitted non-Muslims to legally purchase land within Ottoman territory, provided they paid taxes to the state. At the same time, the new land laws and increasing accessibility to Palestine led to a surge in foreign religious activity. French Catholics initiated what they called a peaceful crusade, visiting sacred sites and financing the construction of churches and religious institutions. German Templars founded farming communities with the hope of Christianizing the land. Protestant missionaries from Britain and the United States also arrived. Even after the 1858 land laws, not many people actually bought land. Those who did were mainly tax collectors, wealthy Jerusalemite families who hadn't previously owned land, and rich merchants. While technically it was illegal to buy village lands, the Ottoman Empire needed money, so they often turned a blind eye. And this shows that changes in land ownership, as well as early forms of industrial and agricultural development, had already begun before the arrival of Zionist settlers. In 1877-78, the Russo-Turkish War broke out, ending in a Russian victory. At the conquest of Berlin in 1878, European powers redrew borders. Serbia, Romania, Montenegro gained independence, and Austria took control of Bosnia and Herzegovina, territories formerly ruled by the Ottomans. That same year, in response to violent anti-Jewish pogroms in Russia, Jewish activists formed the movement of Zion, lovers of Zion. In 1888, Jewish thinker Leo Pinsker published Auto-Emancipation, arguing that Jews needed a homeland to escape persecution, though he wasn't focused on Palestine specifically. The Hof of Zion favored settlement in Palestine. Between 20,000 and 30,000 Russian Jews migrated to Palestine in this early wave, known as the First Aliyah. About 3,000 settled in farming communities, which survived thanks to the financial support of wealthy European Jews. In 1882, Britain had invaded Egypt and effectively took control of it. Egypt soon became a major base of British power in the region. From that point on, Jewish investment and colonization in Palestine intensified. Jewish settlers had access to modern European technology, which gave them a significant economic advantage over local Arabs. For most of the 19th century, Jews who came to Palestine did so for religious reasons. They mainly settled in cities like Jerusalem, which had a Jewish majority by 1890. Haifa, a coastal town, also grew rapidly after the 1850s and eventually lost its Muslim majority. In 1891, a group of prominent Jerusalemites petitioned to the Ottoman government to stop Jewish immigration and land sales. From 1895 to 1914, however, most Jews who came were Zionists with political goals. Unlike earlier immigrants, they aimed to build agricultural colonies as a foundation for a future Jewish state, rather than simply joining religious communities in cities. In 1897, everything changed when Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist from Austria-Hungary, founded the World Zionist Organization in Basel, Switzerland. Inspired partially by the Dreyfus Affair in France, Herzl had already written Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, in 1896, calling for the creation of a Jewish homeland. Herzl traveled widely to win political support for his project. In 1898, he had even met the Grand Duke of Baden and argued that Jewish settlement would help the Ottoman economy. Germany, however, wasn't interested in breaking up the Ottoman Empire. At one point in 1902, Herzl considered alternatives to Palestine. The British offered land in East Africa as a possible refuge for Jews. This proposal, known as the Uganda Scheme, was controversial. The idea was eventually rejected. Palestine remained on the table. Ottoman Sultan Abdulhamid II opposed Zionist aims. He never officially allowed Jews to settle in Palestine. He told his officials to be more vigilant. In 1900, he imposed restrictions on Jewish visits. Still, some immigration and land purchases continued, often through bribery or with the help of corrupt officials. Herzl himself tried to win the Sultan's support, offering to pay off the Ottoman Empire's debts in exchange for permission to carry out his plans. When Herzl met the Sultan on May 19, 1901, the meeting was polite. Despite the Sultan's resistance, international pressure and internal corruption allowed immigration to continue. The Second Aliyah, second major wave of immigration, began in 1904. Between 40,000 and 55,000 Jews arrived during Abdulhamid's rule, and over 30 settlements were established. By the eve of the Young Turk Revolution, which took place in the summer of 1908, it is clear that Arab anti-Zionism had not yet emerged. On the other hand, there was unease about the expanding Jewish community in Palestine and growing antagonism towards it. Abdulhamid II was removed from power on April 27, 1909, following the Young Turk Revolution that effectively ended Ottoman efforts to restrict Zionist immigration. By September 1908, Young Turk leaders were more supportive of Zionism. Later, Zionist leaders and rabbis held talks with the Ottoman officials. Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike noticed that Jewish settlers were buying up Arab land. Arab resistance to Jewish immigration and land sales began well before World War I, even before the first Zionist conquest in 1897. There were concerns. From 1908 onward, Arab newspapers began publishing anti-Zionist articles. In Jaffa, Arabs were provoked by the indiscreet behaviors of some recent immigrants who paraded a Zionist flag in the streets during the celebrations after the revolution. These newcomers, members of the Second Aliyah, also declared that political Zionism must be the basis of Jewish activity in Palestine and that the Jews must elect Zionist deputies to the Ottoman parliament to praise their claim to the country. The Arabs were reported to have restrained their feelings and merely remarked, "Demand what you wish, we shall not grant your wish. Indeed, you are not capable of achieving what you want, so we shall not spoil our celebration, even by debating with you." In 1914, the First World War broke out, and the Ottoman Empire sided with the Central Powers. The Ottoman Empire would find its demise at the hands of the Allied powers, who then carved up the bygone empire.
Don't forget to go to ground.news/historyhustle to subscribe and get 40% off the Vantage plan. Use this QR code or go to the link ground.news/historyhustle. You can find this link in the description and pinned comment.
If you want to learn about how and why the Ottomans sided with Germany, click here. Thanks for watching, and the History Hustler is signing off.